Welcome to the ASEAN Energy Efficiency Outlook Conference. Today's virtual event is organized by Informa Markets, Phil Energy, and the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. To actively participate in today's session, you may click on the Webinar Assistant button, which you may see in the conference theater. If you have questions to our speakers, please type them in at the box located at the Questions tab. To send a message to the rest of the audience, you may send them in at the box located at the Chat tab. For any assistance that you may need, please send a request via the Help tab and our team will assist you. This session will be moderated by Mr. Alexander Ablaza. He is the founding convener and co-chair of the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance. Today, we are truly grateful to have here with us a true leader and expert in energy efficiency, not just in the Philippines, but also all over the world. Please welcome Mr. Alexander Ablaza.
Thank you so much. No, just this morning, I was in another regional event talking about energy efficiency policy and finance. And will need to mobilize up to $892 billion through the next 20 years. So we need a lot of scale-up strategies, approaches, financial modalities, and policies. And today we will hear from experts from the International Energy Agency, the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group, as well as Climb Capital, which manages the CSEF fund, and share their views and outlooks on energy efficiency, scale-up approaches and strategies as a key pillar of Southeast Asia's clean energy transition. So from everyone who's joining us today, please save your questions to our speakers for the Q&A session. You can send them later in the Q&A box after their presentations. We will proceed with our first speaker. Melanie Slade is a Senior Program Manager, Energy Efficiency and Emerging Economies Program of the International Energy Agency. And she will be presenting us the linkage between economic recovery, especially in the region, and this new energy asset class called energy efficiency. Her 30 years work of energy efficiency around the world is just, that stops her whole biodata, right? So it's always a pleasure to have her on panel. So Mel, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Alex, and many thanks to everybody for putting this event together. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to, as Alex said, talk about economic recovery, but no IEA presentation is complete without this wedge diagram just to set the scene. So energy efficiency is the largest contributor to meeting our Paris goals in the IEA Sustainable Development Scenario. An important point about this scenario is that it's not just about energy, it's about access to energy, and it's also about appropriate air quality levels. So it's got these three pillars in it, which are very, very important to this region. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the progress on energy efficiency at the moment is slower than it should be, and it's been weakening gradually over the last few years, and particularly last year, of course. So you'll probably remember when the Sustainable Development Goals were set that we were looking for a doubling of the rate of energy efficiency improvement, or energy intensity as it was expressed. We got there briefly by about 2015, but it's been receding since. So we're saying now that we probably need nearer 4%. So how are we going to get there? Next slide, please. Good news, though, to go with that slightly bad news, is that if we invest in energy efficiency now, whilst economies are picking themselves up and trying to get back on track after the ravages of the health crisis, if we invest in energy efficiency, it's where we get our best return in the energy system as a whole. So for particularly in buildings energy efficiency, both in retrofit and new buildings, but new buildings, of course, are particularly important in this region. For every $1 million invested, we think we'll create about 15 jobs. So it's really important in terms of both job creation and maintenance of existing jobs. But also the really important things are these are not like fly-by-night, short-term things. These are really good quality. They're local jobs. There is the opportunity to build an industry on this that will, as people have said, build back better. Next slide, please. So people often talk about technology and policy, and I'm going to focus on policy. And the reason I'm going to do that is because most of the technologies we need, particularly in the short term, are actually already out there. They're already either mature or being adopted by our early adopters. So we really need to focus on the here and now. Sometimes the 2050 story is distracting people and thinking that we have time to make the changes we need in our energy systems, but we don't have time, and we need to deploy all known technologies, particularly in energy efficiency, in the next 10 years, ideally. Next slide, please. So I come at this from a policy perspective. Others on the panel have other perspectives, but one of the things that we see is progress is made on energy efficiency historically where strong policy is in place. So we have these indicators that we take a look at regularly to see how much of an energy system is covered by mandatory energy efficiency policy. And I would have to say that it's rather low in the ASEAN region. So this was a couple of years ago when these figures were last updated, but only around 10% of ASEAN's total energy use was covered by the mandatory policies that we know to be extremely effective. So this just shows us that we have a lot to go for, and that we need to work with governments in the region to implement these effective policy measures that are well proven the world over, and even proven in some examples in the region too. So next slide, please. I'm going to focus on appliance energy efficiency policy for today. I've mentioned buildings. We know that the technologies are there, but I want to have a look at appliances because this is something that we really need to step up with now, and the region is actually aligning well to do this sort of work. But just as a kind of recap as to why this is so important, in the countries which have had appliance policies for the last 30 years and have implemented them really rigorously, they've saved 15% of their country's total electricity consumption. And that's not just one number, that 15% comes from several different places. And that's equivalent to the total production of wind and solar energy in the 10 top producer countries. So we're talking a very, very significant contribution here. And they do carry on giving. So the EU is one of the regions where this 15% number comes from. But by continually updating and renewing these programs, that 15% is expected to be 25% by 2030. So really, really important numbers here. And I must emphasize, it's well known how we do this. Next slide, please. So because of this need, the UK government, as the presidents of COP26 and the IEA, are working together on a call to action on product energy efficiency. The idea is to encourage governments, work with governments to double the efficiency of key products sold globally by 2030. And we really like to get some really strong engagement in this initiative from the ASEAN region. This, of course, supports national climate targets, but it also supports consumers with products that are more affordable. And it is a point where we need to have an interaction between consumers, the private sector producers, big private sector consumers of products, of course, as well, and the finance community to make these market transformations happen as quickly as possible so that we can drive up the efficiency of these products. Next slide, please. If we were to do this worldwide with the four products which we're talking about, which are motors, industrial motors, I should say, and then residential lighting, refrigerators, and air conditioners, we can see absolutely huge savings globally from this initiative. Next slide, please. So what we've created as a way to pull people together on this is a performance ladder. So we're thinking of increasing MEPS levels as steps on the ladder. We're thinking of label category thresholds as steps on that same ladder, and then incentives, which are at the top of the ladder. So instead of these policies, which in many places are actually disparate, they're separated, they're even run by separate organizations sometimes, making sure they're on the same trajectory. And then also bringing countries together for that same trajectory, so that suppliers, equipment manufacturers, and there are many of them in this region, have a simpler process to go through. They test once, they can sell to all of the regions that collaborate on this type of initiative. That will drive the price of products down because we're aggregating vast markets, and that will make efficient products available to all. So that's the really important facet here. And I just want to show you a few more slides on why we know this is doable, and this isn't a dream. Next slide, please. So this process already exists for electric motors, industrial motors. People don't necessarily present it in this way, but it's there. So we have an international test method. That's the IEC test on the left-hand side of this chart. The steps on that ladder are also defined in an international document that's well recognized. And then governments around the world choose steps on that ladder generally for their MEPS. So here in this region, we have Vietnam, a producer country of electric motors, taking its first foray into this regulating motors at IE1, the lower level. But we have Singapore, who of course doesn't produce, so is a technology taker, saying, right, we'll accept only motors that are IE3. We have an example of India, I mean, still in Asia, not in this region, of course, but just to show how this can work with the labels, where they've got both their MEPS and labels aligned to this ladder. And then many, many examples around the world of countries using this approach. So we know it works. Next slide, please. So what we need to do is make it work for other products. And you may have seen this chart before, but I wanted to bring it back again because one of the problems that we hear people talk about is whether the products are available. And if you look at this chart, the blue bars, the long blue bars, are the regularly available products on certain markets, and this is room air conditioners. The green dots at the top are the best available, but they're kind of outliers in some cases, and the red dots below are the worst available products. And at market average, the product that's most commonly sold is the blue dot. Now, the reason I like to use this chart, the thing that is disturbing but encouraging too, is that the blue dot's very low. It's basically about what's being purchased regularly is about a third of the efficiency of that's available. And that means with today's technologies, with products that exist already in these markets, and you can see Singapore here, Thailand, so you can see markets in this region, the products are already there. So you can have these more efficient products. You don't have to wait. Next slide, please. So the next question is, okay, you've got products, but can we afford the products? So this is some data that Class produced on a KSEP project. And basically what we're looking at here is the cost and efficiency relationship. So if you look at the left-hand chart here, and let's say we take, and we have efficiency across the bottom of this chart, and we have price up the left-hand axis. So if you take a CSPF, so an efficiency indicator, it doesn't matter, exactly what that means in this context, of 5, and you look at the range of the blue dots, you can see that for that efficiency, you can either pay about $380 or you can pay about $1,100 for the same efficiency. So to say that an efficient product has to be more expensive is incorrect, even in a very price-sensitive market like Vietnam in this region. So we're trying to produce this sort of analysis and promote this thinking to show that it's the perception that efficiency has to cost more just isn't correct. That's for first cost. on the right-hand side, we actually have life cycle costs. And here, of course, the more efficient products are even cheaper over the lifetime of the products. This is we're just trying to do some myth busting here to say you can do this. It's absolutely doable. The products are out there. So we need policy, strong policy to be put in place to make this work. That's all that's in our way. Next slide, please. Just to make this connection back to business, to the private sector, to making money. These products, these 4 products that we're talking about with the COP initiative, are globally traded in their millions, and you can see on the charts here, the biggest buyers and consumers of the products. You'll see many countries in this region. But one fantastic success story in this region is how Thailand has become a major manufacturer of air conditioners, second to only to China. And you wouldn't have imagined that 10 years ago. But if you talk to the Thai government about how this happened, they'll say that having standards and labelling programs in place, seeing that created a market for efficient products for their manufacturers, actually drove this process. So the economic gain through having a connection with these standards and labelling programs is absolutely concrete and highly valuable. So just next slide, please. I'm coming to the end. I just wanted to round off with some I'd like to say the top tips for energy efficiency for boosting the ASEAN economy at the moment. The things that I think are kind of perhaps disparate or perhaps missing. So in industry, we need to see more incentive programs. We see lots of reporting programs, but there's not enough in it for the manufacturers. So incentive programs, new business models to encourage the adoption of energy efficiency. Use new technologies to develop real-time energy management systems based on today's low-cost sensors and telecom technologies. In transport, the region's a very special place when it comes to 2- and 3-wheelers. So how does the region really exploit that and become the center of the universe for efficient 2- and 3-wheeler electric vehicles? In terms of buildings, we need to see a much, much faster acceleration of the rollout of building codes, mandatory disclosure of building performance, which can drive the adoption of or the acceptance of higher efficient buildings, creates a market for them, indeed, and that's been proven. Buildings can be a flexible resource for the energy system if they're completely grid connected, so we need our smart buildings to be set up for that. And then to go back to my point on appliances, we need to collaborate internationally to adopt ambitious performance standards, which will benefit both manufacturers and consumers. We also need demand-ready response appliances in the region. And so there are major opportunities there. And then my final slide is just a plea for help, for information. So next slide, please. It's to say our work, our analysis is only as good as the information we can base it on. So if, and there's a few things going on at the moment where we'd appreciate inputs. So we're writing roadmaps for buildings and construction and cooling for the region. So if anybody has information that they'd like to contribute to those, it would be much appreciated. We have an ongoing energy efficiency policies and measures collection process, again, and we're doing a lot of work on new business models using digital technologies. So if anybody has any information they'd like to share on any of these things, then I'd very much appreciate it. And thank you, Alex. I'm done.
Oh, thank you, Mel. That's we cannot underestimate the contribution of appliances, motors, lighting, and all the smaller and even green building construction as their contribution for a more inclusive energy efficiency market transformation. Because it's how about the small users, right? The household, the small businesses, and this is one way, a very significant way of capturing the energy, harvesting the energy wastage from the smaller sectors through appliance regulation, motors, and everything. And I like the step ladders on IE1, IE2 motors because many people are struggling up that ladder as well. So thank you, Mel. When I was in IFC, and I left IFC 8.5 years ago, and they had this wonder product called Edge. So they were rolling out. It was very new, but after I left, it just blossomed, grew, and there was a huge following. So the next speaker is actually the Green Building Program lead for the International Finance Corporation. She brings now she updates us from what I know from 8 years ago. She brings us now with an 8-year update of where they are in Edge and how IFC sees the energy efficiency opportunities for existing building stock in Southeast Asia. Our next speaker is Jip, or I call Jip, of the Green Building Program lead IFC. Jip, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Good to actually follow up with Melanie because my presentation will be very much linked to her and what we're doing on the ground here. And thanks, Alex. I didn't know that you worked for IFC before. Yeah. So to start with my presentation, next slide, please. I would like to introduce myself. So I'm Diệp Đỗ. I lead the IFC Green Building Market Transformation Program in Vietnam. And I'm delighted to be with you here today to talk about the opportunities of energy efficiency improvement in existing buildings in Southeast Asia as a very important part of our Green Building Market Transformation Program in emerging markets. But first, let me introduce IFC. So the International Finance Corporation is the biggest private sector-focused multilateral development bank. We are part of the World Bank Group, and our siblings from left to right are the AEUDW, which lends to mid and low-income governments, the EDA, which lends to the poorest country, MIGA, which provides political risk guarantees to private sectors, and ICSID, which arbitrage the disputes. So those are the members in the World Bank Group. Next, please. So as a development institutions, IFC mandate to work on emission abatements, and building sector is on a collision course with climate right now. What we are seeing is one of the biggest source of emissions. It's growing really fast. It's put energy efficiency, so that puts energy efficiency and green buildings very high up in the policy agenda around the world. Our climate program targets 5 business sectors to capitalize the efficiencies and technologies that will shape up climate business into the future. These include clean energy, climate smart cities, green finance, climate smart agriculture, and finally, green buildings. I've been tracking climate change investments since 2005. And since then, we actually invested 28 billion in long-term finance for climate and mobilized an additional of nearly 22.3 billion through syndicate loans and public-private partnerships. In fiscal years 2020, 30% of IFC investment were climate-related, and IFC target is for 35% of its financing to have climate co-benefits on average over the period of FY21 to FY25. Next, please. So regarding green buildings, our approach is concentrate to 4 areas to capitalize the market and create a virtuous cycle of supply and demand. We activate finance through our banking partners and directly invest from our own balance sheet. We are encouraging the financial sector to actually offer better term through such innovations as green bonds. We responding to the need of a voluntary program that encourage green building adoptions at scale, which is our Edge Green Building software and certification program that Alex just mentioned. And we see how important it is to actually provide expertise and support policy reform of green building codes and government incentives. So on green building code, actually, we create municipal and also national government together with the government agencies, we create green building codes, help with the implementations and enforcement of this code. So IFC has actually support Indonesia, Bangladesh, Colombia, Philippines, Peru, and Costa Rica to actually develop their green buildings codes. In Vietnam, we only have energy efficiency code because as it mentions material, nor it mentions water. But overall, we actually about 10 million square meter of new build space has complied with this code. And it's not new build space actually. For example, in Indonesia, the goal of the national capital is to actually reach 30% reduction of energy, water, and CO2 emissions by 2030. All new buildings must comply with the code, with a goal of 60% compliance in existing building space. In the 3 years of implementations that we goes hand in hand with the Indonesian government, 392 buildings with which is about like 25 million square meters of floor space are incorporated, are compliant in Jakarta only alone. Then next is after the code, right? I already mentioned in oh, sorry. Can you change slide, please? Sorry. I think I already gone through 2 slides ahead. Yes, next, please. Yes, this is the case study of Jakarta, which I just mentioned, and next. Yes, after the code, right, what we are trying to do is also to create a free market for green buildings and for energy efficient buildings, and which is why we introduced the EDGE certifications for, it's actually applied for both new and existing buildings over a wide range of typologies. So we include for homes, for hospitals, for industry, light industry, and data centers, for offices, retail. Actually, retail has a wide range of retail. We have from airports to department store that actually certified with EDGE. We have warehouses because many of our emerging markets actually is developing its logistic industry, hospitality, for education and communities. Next, please. So in EDGE, what is the strongest thing about EDGE is that it has a software, a free online software that I would probably introduce in the next slide, that will help actually project planners and also policy makers as well as architects and engineers to actually easily implement green buildings. It set an achievable standards that start with 20% of saving across energy, water, and material, embodied energy in materials actually, as the baseline. And finally, we shake hands with third-party certification bodies such as SGS ThinkStep, SGS Sintali, the Green Building Councils in many countries, as well as GPCI to be our certification partner. And we provide the third-party verifiable label to projects. Next, please. So this is the strongest thing about EDGE. We create a software which is the heart of the system. This we have seen it is the real game changer to attract companies that have never certified their projects before. First, the interface is easy enough to actually be used by CFO because we are the finance institutions, right? So we always think about the guys with money, the guys who actually design the projects and help to communicate with them. So even CFO can actually figure out the rough financial cost and benefits of a certifications in minutes. Second, the architects can actually work with the software even before they actually have their design to choose a set of green design options. And this is very important because actually what we're doing right now, what we're seeing right now is that the green measures, once we incorporate in early on, can be delivered at lower cost to no cost. Third, the green measures are selected, their cost and payback. The green measures are selected, their cost and payback in lower utility bills is calculated instantaneously. So once when you choose the green measures, you would see the cost and the payback time immediately on the software. This gives a natural preference to passive measures like shading or like insulations, which deliver efficiencies regardless of the skill level of the building managers, and also offer lower cost, more cost efficient actually. And then next is the actual active measures, which are the cheapest, the second cheapest options. And then finally, the building managers will go on the most expensive options, which is like solar, rooftop solars. And then lastly, the software kind of like incorporate energy model in the way that actually easy to deliver. So this is the view of the certificate. You can see that actually it deliver key numbers that will actually enable the projects to show these to banks or to decision makers. We have 3 levels of EDGE certifications. 20%, 40% you can go to EDGE Advanced, and we also hope that buildings will go for energy zero carbon, and we're already seeing it in Philippines. So projects can be certified anywhere. EDGE is now can be found in 45 countries, and actually EDGE software can be implemented in more than 150 countries. We at the moment have over 22 million square meters certified worldwide. This is our growth last year, and you can see that even in COVID time, the growth of green building certifications is going up. Sorry, next slide, please. Sorry, keep. Yes, this is the certificate, and next, please. Yeah, this is the 3 levels of EDGE certifications, and next. Yeah, this is our focus market that we are talking right now, and next one. Yeah, you can see that the growth that we have last year is still growing really fast, even with COVID. And next, please. Yes. So I have 2 case studies, and I would wrap up. You can actually find more information through the link or Google these case studies. So in Indonesia, EDGE actually has been adopted by the National Bank, the Central Bank of Indonesia, and they have financial incentives for green buildings. So instead of paying down 50% at the time of purchasing the home, green homeowners just have to put down 10%. So this is incentive for green homes in Indonesia. And next one, please. This is Balai Biada program in the Philippines. This is by the NHMFC, which is a secondary mortgage player agency belong to the government. So this program is actually for both a new and existing housing, affordable housing in the Philippines, where they would be using EDGE as the standard to actually sort out who would be the green housing owners and the stock that the market would, that the government player will actually buy up from developers and from other finance institutions. Next one, please. Yes, and finally, just to show effort not from the governments but from a group, which is the NEO group. They are trying to retrofit 300,000 square meter of office space for EDGE zero carbon actually. So it's existing buildings, but they determined to actually retrofit it to zero carbon standards. And that's wrap up my presentations. I'm sorry, I'm not really managing my time well, but if you have questions, please feel free to email me. I think my email is in the next slide.
Thank you very much, Gia. That's a very nice, fresh update after I left IFC 8 years ago. Imagine 22 million square meters growing, and you continue to roll out with the same business model, free software. So that's just going to grow astronomically. Our next speaker has pushed out $70 billion in the last 20 years in debt and equity capital. And he feels, just like me, he feels the pain of pushing out through this asset class called energy efficiency. But at the same time, I'm sure that there'll be a positive list of recommendations of what to do next and how to prepare markets. So without further ado, he will be talking about the Southeast Asia Clean Energy Facility called CCEF, which Climb Capital is managing. May I introduce Mason Wallach of Climb Capital. Mason, the floor is yours.
Alex, first, thanks for the warm introduction. Really do appreciate it. And without further ado, I think that I'm going to try and change up some of the language here, noting the great speakers that we've had to really focus on what we see are the major opportunities, as well as the issues and where we try to address that in the context of CCEF. So the next slide, and the next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So who and what is CCEF, and what do we do in the region? CCEF is a relatively new facility or fund that was established a little more than a year ago. And the genesis of CCEF is to help provide early stage, high risk, high impact capital upfront into clean energy businesses and projects where we can make a difference to accelerate the low carbon transition. So that's the nature of our strategy, is to help build a portfolio of investments through Southeast Asia. Our core geographic focus, I believe, is in the heart of where energy efficiency needs to happen worldwide, considering temperatures and population densities. And that's in the Philippines, as well as Vietnam and Indonesia. And for us, we are tracking and making investments across our target sectors. This includes what we think is going to drive the low carbon transition, which isn't just energy efficiency, but energy efficiency is an important part. So we are focusing also on renewable energies, that's wind, solar, and storage, as well as electric mobility. And the way that we look at these sectors are reinforcing in their ability to combat climate change. Next slide, please. I think we're well aware of the issue for needing capital for the low carbon transition, and that goes for energy efficiency. Where we think, though, that energy efficiency plays a dual role for climate change is not just the direct savings, but the understanding that if we're looking at cooling solutions, this helps address what we refer to as a coincident peak problem for utilities. And that could be like Meralco in the Philippines, or PLN in Indonesia, or EVN in Vietnam, is that their supply planning has to do with meeting their peak demand, which generally does happen. We see more often being tied to aircon being a leading indicator for when peak demand will be reached. And that is becoming more pronounced in the region. So for us, energy efficiency is crucial to help manage and mitigate that long-term objective. Next slide, please. I wanted to just focus a little bit in terms of when we talk about energy efficiency, what it means to us and how we like to seed fund and provide early stage co-funding for energy efficiency. I just mentioned in terms of what we see for peak demand as being an issue, and that also drives how we look at energy efficiency. And just to clarify, with the green box here, we do look at some of the traditional retrofits or chiller replacements. So we're on the quote unquote the wet side of the business in terms of chillers. We're also looking at airside solutions as well. And that could mean comfort control, or using a lot of the new technologies that we see developing here in the region. Startups that we're also seeing come into Southeast Asia, as well as solution providers out of other more mature markets, out of Europe, the States, and Australia, to come here and to see that we can help adapt air or comfort-based solutions for energy efficiency. So that's a big part of our strategy, is focusing on these elements for energy efficiency. If we don't mind, if we can go to the next slide. And without talking through this slide in a bit of detail, but really focusing on energy efficiency, what we aim to do for the sector is that we do believe that there is a confluence of opportunities that's coming about today. And we aim to move the market and move the needle in the region in the right way for this. So I mentioned that we're looking to crowd in and bring in new technology providers and work with those that are here. And ideally, what we want to do is to help those ESCOs or other businesses expand their pipelines for energy efficiency, grow their capacity and capability, which we think is a challenge for the entire sector, and ultimately to reach that size and scale that energy efficiency needs, because we view it as highly capital intensive for the business profiles that we're following. We look to be a bridge for energy efficiency here in the region to help bring that scale. And if it's all right, we could go to the next slide. And the way that we look at energy efficiency and what we think the gaps are, or the early stage gap, has to do with this risk and return curve. Where we like to come in and where we're targeting to come in for energy efficiency is at just after the concept stage. We believe that for us, we're willing to stretch and come on board as early as possible. And part of that is because of what we've heard from the other speakers today, is that there are standards that are being used worldwide. We would like to help embrace and use those standards in the region. And the reason why we want to do that is because we believe that the growth and the access to capital needs to be based on the right contract uses and formations, as well as the software systems to aggregate the measurement and verification of energy savings, and if need be, registration of even carbon credits that goes along with that. So we're willing to come on board at a very early stage to help those companies grow and to get through what we think are the key puzzle pieces that need to be achieved. And that's a solid business model, but also hitting execution in the region. And where we see the capacity building and that we're willing to support is upfront to get those lessons learned, not just for the investee or the ESCOs or the developers that we're working with, but also the lenders, to help bring them up through the risk curve and to get more comfortable with how do you finance platforms and portfolios for energy efficiency. And for us, if required, we can go through this in Q&A. We're actually in active dialogue with regional lenders right now on how we can partner to do that. So that's in a nutshell where we look to support. And we also think that those are the areas that we can help to address, which are critical risk issues, but also the opportunity that follows. The next slide here does not talk about energy efficiency just yet, but shares with you the successful investments that we've had so far to date. And I think that this is a good indication of where we see a lot of the investment dollars going for the low carbon transition. It has not necessarily been in energy efficiency. Out of the 4 projects that we're showing on this slide, 3 of them are what I'd consider traditional utility scale investments. But the 4th, the Indonesian rooftop or CNI platform, is not. It's a scalable business model. And the importance that we see for our ability to fund and finance and grow a business like this applies to a certain degree to energy efficiency. So we are working with some of the funding partners that are coming alongside, even in this platform, on how do we unlock and expand from scalable business models that we are investing in now into energy efficiency. While they may be a bit intrusive compared to C&I rooftops, we think that we're comfortable with the credit and the local risk profiles with the off-takers to actually add value to the EE side of the business. Just a quick note in terms of who are our limited partners or who support CSEF. They're some of the largest investors for climate change globally, and a number of these are big supporters to the Cooling Challenge initiatives. So when you hear about like the Kigali Cooling Challenge initiatives, a lot of the same funders that support us support the Cooling Challenge and energy efficiency as a whole. So we're very active in terms of working with our funding partners because they very much do support the growth of energy efficiency. We also work alongside sister facilities, including TARA and the Energy Transition Partnership. 2 out of 3 of these organizations have local touch points and people on the ground in the Philippines. So that includes ourselves as well as TARA. And we are actively working with ETP and TARA specifically to see how we can even further address energy efficiency and to help bring about the needed change and also a big opportunity that we see for an economic growth of assets. On this last slide here, who is Climb Capital, which is the manager? We're a fund manager and we are managing CSEF is our core effort and focus. The leadership team, we've been around and working in this region for most of our careers. And the important element is just to highlight, we're on the ground in Southeast Asia. So we're very active working in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines with our investees real time with boots on the ground. Last slide. Oh, next slide. Other way, sorry. Just the final slide. Well, I think while we're trying to get the final slide to show, Alex, this is the end of, I believe, 12 minutes, trying to keep to time as much as I can. So I'd like to hand it back to you in terms of Q&A and next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mason. Yeah, that was a very efficient time-wise. So it's really interesting that there's this new facility, a CSEF, that's trying to prime the pump of energy efficiency projects and investments, right? And it's high-risk capital beginning, and energy efficiency is almost often run by a bunch of engineers who are fantastic engineers, but not financial engineers. So it's that high-risk capital at the very beginning that should just prime that pump and get it going. So it's a new asset class. So thanks, Mason. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you say cooling is a big thing in Southeast Asia and most of tropical Asia. So just a reminder to our audience, we have a very limited time for Q&A. So those questions that don't get answered through the remaining minutes of the session, we will share your questions with the speakers as well as their contact information. So many thanks again to this fantastic panel. Let me just kick off the Q&A with a number of questions. My first question is for Mel Slade. So given today's policy and investment baseline in the region, how do you think Southeast Asia can scale up energy efficiency on the road to 2040?
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, isn't it? And I think Mason has some of the answers. Deep has some of the answers too. But the thing that I'm particularly interested in at the moment, or we are particularly interested in, is using, as I mentioned right at the end, digital tools so that we can bring the supply and the demand side closer together. If I could just use an example, if imagine an ESCO project, we all think ESCOs could help energy efficiency, but they don't really take off in the way that everybody would like them to. They haven't, there's a few brilliant examples around the world, but they haven't really taken off. one of the things, if you can now in real time predict savings from a particular measure, then prove they happened really quickly, cheaply, commoditize certain energy efficiency measures, then using digital technologies, then I think we could see a massive scale up, because then we can get the money which is already there, we can get it flowing. But at the moment, it's that proof, it's that doubt, it's that in terms of the scale. So every sector has its typical projects. If we can commoditize those and make them simple, reliable, that would be the biggest thing I think we could do.
Oh, thanks, Mel. We're at the dawn of coming of digital platforms, crypto, blockchain. So point measurement. Down this morning there was another speaker that spoke about the per appliance uploads of energy savings. So just a small refrigerator uploading energy savings, and that getting monetized. So we're just waiting for that right technology, right? That solution that can be embraced by all sectors. My next question goes to Jip of IFC. So there was in fact another question in the box. But can the edge software allow estimations of cost and or even carbon emissions, for example, of the building? Can the software actually do that?
Yes. So this is to also answer to Melanie's as well, because actually edge software, although it's not like a very high tech, like not like IES or the others, but very, very detailed software that will give you the exact measurements. But even like Design Builder or IES, when we tested it, of course, it will have a certain percentage of difference compared to real-time uses, right? So Edge is basically give you a very, very easy solution for you to enter your using design. And then immediately it will show up in the report of how much you actually have to invest more, the incremental cost, right? And what you would actually achieve throughout the years. So at the moment, this proof enough for Filipinos investors. Of course, in Vietnam, Indonesia, they still hesitate because there's still the cost versus what they can gain, and the energy price is still low in these countries. That's why they are still hesitant about it. But when you actually incorporate that with a bit of statistics that show the growth of energy price in these countries, eventually it will actually convince investors. So we don't really have this problem convincing investors from hotel or industrial. It's just residential, where the one who benefit will be the building users, and the one who invest will be the developers, when the benefit is not really seen. That's why we need a bit of help and push. But yes, Edge can actually give you all that numbers.
Oh, fantastic. Jim. You remind me of my last few rough studies. I've collected some data of correlating energy efficiency adoption with the increase of commercial selling and leasing rates. So there's a direct correlation between energy efficiency adoption and property values, property asset values. Mason, what does this is another $1 million question for you. So what does CSEF look for in supporting energy efficiency opportunities? So the pain I was talking about. So what exactly are you looking for if you were to prime the pump of a new energy efficiency opportunity? What is that will make a CSEF put in high risk capital?
Sure. Well, I would like to explain what we were looking for when we launched and where we are now, and this considers our geographic footprint. Is that when we launched, we had scoured the emerging markets in Southeast Asia to see if we can find those that would be able to contract in accordance with what we would like, be able to implement the solutions and technology solutions and billing solutions we would like. And we didn't find actually what we wanted just yet. So where we're really looking at is to go on board earlier and to say that we're going to come on board and help our investees build it. And what we want to build is what we're all talking about here today. That's that money that's going to go into the systems. That's the software, it's the integration, it's the standards, and a lot of the soft work that we think needs to be done upfront right, so that when the next round of investors or lenders come in, they can start calculating their cover ratios. They can look at their credit scoring and they can see what they like and aggregate. And the great thing is, in terms of where we are now, even from 1 year ago, is that there are a significant number of lessons learned from C&I solar on some of these parameters. While energy efficiency may be a little bit more challenging from interface issues, I believe that we're in a much better position than we were a year ago. So we're going to be focusing on spending upfront to get this in place with the investees that we're going to work with. And the reason for that is that we've seen the return rates for C&I platforms and other renewable energy just fall off a cliff. And the truth of the matter is, right now, energy efficiency is a very attractive asset class on a comparative risk-weighted basis. So it may be high-risk capital, but I do believe that the cherry out there is looking better this year than it was before, and we're starting to get some of those systems starting to look at how do we make this happen here in the region. So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, fantastic. You bring up a point, a very interesting point, that what the rooftop solar industry is doing actually is providing a very good precedent business model for ESCOs to jump in with off-balance sheet solutions, right? So it's just that the rooftop solar just made it tangible for many CNI and financiers sectors, right? But it's practically the same concept. The numbers change, but it's the same concept, right? So fantastic.
And the lenders see it. And the lenders are starting to see it.
Exactly, from the rooftop down to the basement, right? Mel, back to you. How do you see the urgency and the need for innovation for international collaboration on appliance policy? So you showed a wonderful comparison of ladders for air conditioners and IE ratings of motors, right? So how urgent is it, and what kind of innovation moving forward? What kind of innovation do the governments need? And in ASEAN, with an intergovernmental organization like ASEAN, how do you see this moving forward, especially for appliances and motors?
Thanks, Alex. One of my, as you know, firmly held views is that governments, having been a regulator of appliances, having sat in that seat, we spend an awful lot of time going through negotiations, and everybody around the world is having the same negotiations on the same subjects. And when you're talking about globally traded products that are ubiquitous, I don't think that's the best model. I think that governments have very few staff. We're saying policy is the most important thing in this context, particularly of residential energy consumption, where the savings are small to the individuals. You have to regulate to really make a quick difference. It's well proven. You have to incentivize as well to bring a more efficient products in the market, but you really do need that regulation as well. Mm-hmm. But the fact that everybody's going the same conversation with the same manufacturers using the same standards processes is very, very inefficient. So there is a really strong place for much closer collaboration. If a country's just doing this for the first time, don't start from scratch. Look at what's happened elsewhere and adopt and go quickly. There is really no strong case at all for these protracted processes, particularly when at the early stages. Clearly, if a country's been doing this for 30 years, they're starting to stretch the envelope, then it's more difficult. But we're not talking about that in ASEAN. We're saying 10% at the moment only, maybe a little more than that, is covered, of energy consumption is covered by mandatory policy. There's an awful lot that can be just done very quickly if governments can find a mechanism for doing that. Well, and then linked to things like the work that Mason's doing. So if you can have vast numbers of similar projects like changing out motors, why can't you commoditize that and then take Mason's approach with that? There's no good reason. We just need to get on with it. We need to do it now.
Right. Oh, thanks, Mel. So aggregation has a very strong effect on bulk prices, right? Of newer, more expensive, what is perceived to be more expensive technologies initially. And I also note, Mel, that laggards in a region tend to be dumping grounds of the more obsolete technologies, and they face tougher time now washing them off their markets. So yeah, it's collaboration is indeed a must. Jip, back to you. So apart from this green building tool, and we had one question, and you mentioned free software, but they were still asking, so what costs just to enter into the EDGE certification program, right? And what other products are being developed aside from EDGE? What other products are being developed by IFC to facilitate development of more green, more sustainable buildings?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Just to clear about the cost, the software is free. You can actually go on our website, edgebuildings.com, to see the price of certification for each country. Because this is not actually paid to IFC, it's paid to the third-party certification body. We take no part of it. Yeah. So about our actually we not only just have Edge. Edge is for buildings, right? We have actually other products for larger scale projects. We have city products, which is Apex. So Apex will help the government to actually greening and decarbonize their whole city. It helped to modeling. It's similar to how Edge software works. We simplify everything, put in the numbers for the governors to actually see how their city is performing right now and how to decarbonize their city. We also have BRI, which is Building Resilient Index, which is the other side of mitigations, right? We have adaptations. And I'm sure the hotel sectors across ASEAN would need that because we all have, hotels that build very, very close to the coastline. So we also have that too for cities. And we even have a tool for new urban development, which is GUD, the Green Urban Development Tool, it works the same way as Edge. So Edge is for buildings, GUD is for urban development, and Apex is for the whole city.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, I think you're providing, IFC is providing just more tools to decongest urban centers right now. So it's great. Mason, before we turn to the audience for their growing list of questions, what does the CSEF see as the key barriers for Southeast Asia to unlock this new asset class called energy efficiency? And if you see these barriers, what capacity building assistance can CSEF provide to unlock those barriers?
Sure. So Alex, I think that we're differentiating between the barriers in a high-income market like Singapore, as well as the other markets. I'll share with you one that we think is a lesser barrier, and that's regulations right now, which I think a few years ago we said it would be key. I think maybe security around who owns the upgrades that we're doing is one element, but we do believe just the return profile of energy efficiency is starting to become standalone economic, which is a great change, in particular with on-peak off-peak pricing. So the key barriers that we see for the region is familiarity in general with a number of financiers. And that's the credit market to lower down your weighted average cost of capital is a key element. When it comes to emerging markets, though, we think that the risks are piled on higher. And the harder risk that we see is expertise within a given country or a market to actually execute and grow. So who's going to do the audits? Who's going to do the installation? Who knows how to do the M&V? So a lot of the capacity in terms of can we find the right team members that have all the composite skill sets to build and grow a new business that's been challenging for a long time is a challenge for us to find homegrown opportunities in our core markets of Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So for us, that has been a core. But I mentioned how we're dealing with that is that's to go in, double down our efforts, and provide more higher risk capital And the other way that we're dealing with that is that we're working very closely with a number of financial partners here on how we may be able to provide like viability gap support, or to incentivize some of these lenders to take the leap from C&I rooftop into EE, which, by the way, could be, from a balance sheet perspective or an exposure perspective, could be larger than C&I solar. So we're trying to actually explain to them that this is a very large asset class, and they're catching up. So that's where we see maybe the key risks that we're trying to face, but also differentiating, say, between like a Singapore market and
Right.
more emerging markets.
Thanks. No, I mean, more countries are now reviewing their old laws, right? Or pushing out new laws. Malaysia will come up with a new law. Indonesia is reviewing their 2011
Yes.
law. Philippines just came out with a brand new comprehensive law, so that would help. But you did mention that viability gap funding is a must in what up to 8 of the 10 ASEAN markets. You still have energy prices subsidized on the power sector side and in gas. So viability gap funding is probably one of the mechanisms to make private sector investments viable. So now let's turn, thanks Mason. Let's turn over to the audience. I see a growing list of questions here. How large would the rebound be if we improve end-use consumer energy services like personal transportation, home heating, or appliances? Is this something, this must be a question for Mel. So there would be a rebound, and that's a nightmare for any energy efficiency advocate, right? That behavioral rebound. If we improve, so more energy efficient air conditioners, we leave them all longer, right? Or keep the doors open longer. So any thoughts on rebound for consumer energy products?
Clearly it's something that's been studied with a huge amount of detail, and there are many papers that have been written on this. But from a personal perspective, particularly in the emerging and developing world, generally rebound's a good thing. It means that people have better services, they're more comfortable, they have the things that they need. So I don't see it as a negative at all. It's an important aspect of people's improving people's lives in a region like ASEAN.
Right. So yeah, it's energy efficient. One of the pillars is just behavior, right? And it's an inherent part of transforming the market, that there'll be a small rebound in every time you transform. So thanks Mel. Another question from Dr. Chinderat Taylor. This is for Mason. Would you please elaborate on reasons behind the countries that you are active in early stage investment phase? So Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines. Why the 3 countries, Mason?
Okay, or maybe not Thailand. Okay, so why the 3 countries? Is that one, it has to do with CO2 intensity and growth. So Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, for us, we see are going to have sustained GDP growth rates and high intensity. So if we carry on at 5, 6, 7% GDP growth rates as part of recovery, what we see that means is a requirement in the near term for more dependable capacity, which is either coal or gas. So for us, it's urgent that we stem the issue of climate change in these countries as a priority. And this is where we think energy efficiency is doubly important, is because it is coincident with peak demand. And particularly when we look at recovery and some very interesting patterns that are coming out with energy use out of COVID, is that it's now more important than ever that we look at energy efficiency. So that's the reason why we're focusing on Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, is because we think we have a good bang for our dollar. And the important element is because we're not here to displace the private sector. So if the private sector is going in, our role is diminished. We look to be catalytic in nature to help crowd in private sector funding behind us where there's gaps. And in these 3 countries, we see that we could be a little bit more meaningful than others. However, we are the Southeast Asia Clean Energy Facility. We are looking at expanding our footprint to other markets, and that very much means that we will be looking at opportunities regionally, including energy efficiency, as well as looking at some of those more mature markets like Malaysia and Thailand that are still key to solving the climate change puzzle here in Southeast Asia.
Very good. Thanks, Mason. You know, we're running out of time. We're 10 minutes past our session, but I'd like to assure Mr. Albert Shu, Mr. Lim Chin Hao, Mr. Surendro, and all those who have posted questions that we will forward them to the panelists. They're all very interesting questions. So I'd like to thank our speakers, and we will upload all this video on the AEW website. We would like to thank Informal Markets, PhilEnergy, the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, or PE2, for organizing this session. Please stay tuned for the upcoming conferences we have lined up for you today. Meanwhile, you may also visit our 24/7 marketplace, where you can set up video or voice call meetings directly with our exhibitors. And lastly, we invite everyone to join PhilEnergy 2021. That's from the 8th to the 10th of December, another huge hybrid event. For more information, visit www.philenergyexpo.com. So I'd like to thank my fellow panelists. I'd like to thank the organizers from Informal Markets and PhilEnergy, PE2. I'd like to thank also all you participants. Thank you so much. Salamat, kapkun krap, come on, terima kasih.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alex, and all the speakers.
Thank you to you
So
too.
much.
Okay, so we've been disconnected from the event. Well, thank you so much to Vicky and the rest of the team.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Plaza.
Alex.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay, thank
Vicky
you.
and team.
Jeep, Mel, Nathan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.